For countless millennia, the predators ruled the galaxy. They were not just a species, they were a force of nature, an unrelenting tide that swept across the stars, leaving ruin in its wake. Their dominion stretched beyond measure, their fleets blackened the skies of 1,000 worlds, and their name was spoken in hushed whispers across the cosmos. They had no need for diplomacy, no interest in alliances. There was only conquest. From the moment of birth, a predator knew only one law: strength. Their society was built upon it, their leaders chosen through brutal combat, and their victories carved into history through sheer, merciless force. To them, war was not a necessary evil. It was a sacred right. The weak existed to be consumed, and the strong thrived. It had always been this way. It would always be this way. The predators had faced many species in their long reign. Some were more advanced, wielding weapons that could shatter moons and bend the fabric of space itself. Others were physically formidable, standing tall with armored hides and natural weaponry that made them worthy adversaries for a time. Yet, none of them lasted. No species had ever managed to resist the onslaught of the predators for long. The inevitability of their victory was the foundation upon which their empire was built. Then, their scouts reported a new world, a blue and green speck on the outer edges of their empire, orbiting an average star. It was called Earth. At first glance, there was nothing particularly remarkable about it. The atmosphere was suitable for habitation, and its inhabitants, humans, were carbon-based life forms not unlike many they had encountered before. Primitive. Fragile. Unworthy. The intelligence reports suggested that humans had only recently achieved spaceflight. They had no interstellar presence to speak of, no galactic alliances to call upon. They were alone, vulnerable. The predators had seen this before. They had crushed civilizations far mightier, devoured species with planetary defenses that made Earth's weapons look like sticks and stones. The outcome was already decided before the invasion even began. The humans would fall like all the rest. Their fleet moved into position, an unstoppable armada that had razed entire star systems to dust. Their warships, titanic constructs of death and destruction, emerged from the void, blotting out the stars as they prepared for yet another effortless conquest. But then something strange happened. Something unexpected. As the Predator fleet closed in on Earth, they intercepted human transmissions. At first, they expected the usual cries for mercy, the desperate pleas for peace that so many species had broadcasted before their doom. But instead, the messages contained something else: resolve. The humans were not begging for their lives. They were not pleading for surrender. They were organizing. This puzzled the Predator commanders. Every species they had encountered had crumbled under the weight of impending annihilation. Fear had always been their greatest weapon, a force stronger than any armament. Yet, the humans were different. Their messages were filled with unity, defiance, and something even more unsettling: anticipation. Still, the Predators remained confident. Defiance was meaningless without power to back it up. The invasion would proceed as planned. Humanity would be erased, their planet claimed, their resources harvested, and their name remembered only as another footnote in the annals of the Predator Empire. The fleet descended upon Earth with the fury of 1,000 storms. They deployed shock troops, heavy armor, and aerial bombardments. The invasion had begun. The first battles unfolded as expected. Predator strike teams landed across major population centers, their weapons reducing buildings to rubble in mere moments. Their war machines, towering engines of destruction, rolled through city streets unopposed. It was supposed to be routine, another easy conquest. But then, something changed. Instead of breaking, the humans fought back. And they fought with a fury unlike anything the Predators had ever seen. They adapted. The humans didn't flee in terror, they coordinated. Within moments of the invasion's first strikes, they responded with terrifying efficiency. Anti-aircraft batteries locked onto Predator drop ships with pinpoint precision, tearing them from the sky. Ground forces mobilized in ways that defied all expectations, launching ambushes that crippled entire Predator divisions before they even had time to react. The humans weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for annihilation of their enemy. The Predator commanders were confused. No species had ever withstood the opening days of an invasion. The first strikes were designed to break morale, to crush resistance before it could form. Yet, the humans weren't breaking. They were escalating. Urban environments became death traps, with human soldiers using their own cities as fortresses, setting up kill zones, planting explosives in narrow streets, and using knowledge of their terrain to devastating effect. Predator forces found themselves surrounded, outmaneuvered, and ambushed at every turn. It was an insult. How could these fragile creatures stand against the most powerful force in the galaxy? How could they not fear annihilation? The answer was as simple as it was terrifying. Humanity had never known peace. Unlike the pacifist civilizations that had crumbled before them, humans had spent their entire existence waging war against themselves. They were born from conflict, shaped by endless battles, and hardened by the struggles of their own history. Their world had never known the luxury of prolonged peace. Where other species had evolved to avoid war, humans had perfected it. They didn't just fight to survive. They fought to win. With each passing battle, the Predator commanders realized something horrifying: humanity was learning. They were adapting at an alarming rate, analyzing enemy movements, adjusting tactics mid-battle, and exploiting every weakness in the Predator war machine. And for the first time in their long and bloody history, the Predators felt something unfamiliar: doubt. Their greatest weapon, fear, was useless. The humans didn't cower. They retaliated. Their counterattacks were not only effective but methodical, precise, devastating. Every time the Predators adjusted their approach, the humans countered with something even more unexpected. The war had only just begun, but one thing was already clear: this was no ordinary conquest. This was something far worse. This was a reckoning. The Predator fleet hung over Earth like a shroud of impending doom, its vast warships casting long shadows over the planet below. From the depths of space, they had expected to see panic, hear the desperate cries of a broken species pleading for mercy. Instead, they received something entirely unexpected: organized resistance. As their invasion force touched down, the Predators were met not with surrender, but with a storm of gunfire and defiance. The humans had prepared. Every street, every building, every inch of land had been turned into a battlefield designed to bleed the invaders dry. Cities became fortresses, forests became traps, and deserts became killing fields. Humanity was not simply defending, they were waging war. The Predator commanders, having never encountered such immediate and coordinated resistance, ordered a swift escalation. More troops, heavier weaponry, orbital bombardments. The plan was to overwhelm the humans with sheer force. It had always worked before. But this time, it didn't. Human forces, from elite military divisions to civilian militias, fought with an unmatched ferocity. They coordinated seamlessly, using encrypted communications to direct ambushes, strikes, and counterattacks. Predator units found themselves engaged in guerrilla warfare unlike anything they had ever faced. Their advanced armor and energy weapons were powerful, but the humans exploited every weakness. Military tacticians directed airstrikes with pinpoint accuracy, leveling entire battalions before they could regroup. Snipers took out command officers with deadly precision, leaving enemy units leaderless and confused. Engineers hacked into Predator communication systems, intercepting and disrupting their orders, turning their technological superiority against them. Every effort to gain a foothold was met with an equally devastating pushback. The Predators, for the first time in their long history of conquest, found themselves not as the unstoppable force, but as the ones struggling to adapt. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its technology, nor its numbers. It was its ability to learn. Within hours, human generals and strategists had identified the Predators' battle tactics, their preferred formations, their supply lines. Within days, counter-strategies had been developed and executed with ruthless efficiency. Within weeks, the war had changed from a simple invasion into a prolonged, grinding conflict that the Predators had never anticipated. They had faced enemies with superior technology before. They had faced species that were physically stronger. But never had they faced an enemy that could outthink them in real time. Every battle humans fought, they learned. Every loss, they adapted. And every victory, no matter how small, fueled an unbreakable resolve. The predators had built their empire on fear. They had conquered through intimidation, crushed opposition before it could begin, and silenced rebellion with overwhelming displays of power. But fear was useless against an enemy that refused to submit. In past invasions, resistance movements would crumble once their people realized the hopelessness of their situation. But with humanity, it was the opposite. Every atrocity committed, every city razed, every village wiped from existence only fueled the fire of defiance. Rather than bowing to despair, the humans became more ruthless, more cunning, more united. The predator commanders watched in horror as their usual tactics failed. Civilian populations, instead of surrendering, took up arms. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons, new countermeasures, new strategies. Even in the heart of destruction, humanity did not break. They grew stronger. The turning point came when a predator strike force targeted a major military command center, expecting to cripple Earth's coordination. They deployed an elite unit, armed with the deadliest weapons in their arsenal, expecting an easy victory. They were met with a massacre of their own troops. Human intelligence had anticipated the attack before it even happened. The facility had been evacuated, leaving behind only a deadly trap. When the predators entered, they walked straight into a network of concealed explosives, sniper nests, and ambush teams. Within minutes, the entire strike force was wiped out. Not a single predator returned to their fleet. Panic began to set in among the invaders. They had lost battles before, but never like this. Never so decisively. Never so completely. The predator commanders, for the first time in their species' history, began to experience something they did not understand: doubt. Their war doctrine had always been built upon overwhelming superiority. They never fought wars of attrition because they never needed to, but now, they were caught in one. And they were losing. Reports from the front lines painted a grim picture. Entire battalions wiped out in ambushes. Supply lines cut off. Morale plummeting. Communications breaking down. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking with precision, retreating into the shadows, only to strike again. The once unquestioned might of the predator empire was being unraveled by a species they had dismissed as weak. As the war dragged on, the predators faced a realization they had never considered possible: their defeat was no longer just a possibility. It was becoming inevitable. Humanity had done more than survive the initial invasion. They had turned the tide. They had transformed their world into an impenetrable fortress. And more terrifying than that, they were no longer just defending, they were preparing to counterattack. The predator fleet, once so confident in its superiority, now stood on the precipice of disaster. The question was no longer whether they could conquer Earth, the question was whether they could survive the wrath of humanity. The Predator High Command sat in silence aboard their flagship, gazing at the battlefield reports scrolling across the holographic displays before them. The invasion of Earth had taken a turn unlike any in their long history of conquest. What was meant to be an effortless extermination had become a desperate struggle for survival. Never before had they faced an enemy like humanity, an enemy that refused to kneel, that adapted with terrifying speed, that waged war not out of desperation but out of sheer defiance. Every failed assault, every lost squadron, every shattered warship was a painful reminder that they had underestimated this species. And now, it was too late to change course. Humanity had seized the momentum. The initial phase of the war had been one of resistance. Now, it was one of retribution. At the start of the invasion, the predators had relied on brute force, believing their superior numbers and technology would ensure swift victory. But the war had dragged on far longer than they had expected. Human forces had not only survived but had begun launching devastating counterattacks, turning what should have been a slaughter into a strategic nightmare for the invaders. No longer content with merely holding the line, humanity had shifted to full-scale guerrilla warfare. Cities once thought lost were retaken. Destroyed military bases were rebuilt into fortresses. Factories operated at full capacity, producing new weapons and advanced countermeasures against predator technology. Even civilian populations played a role, manufacturing explosives, intercepting enemy transmissions, and providing critical intelligence. What the predators failed to understand was that war was not a foreign concept to humanity. It was embedded in their history, their culture, their very nature. Every conflict, every hardship had shaped them into the most dangerous enemy the predators had ever faced. The invaders had come to Earth expecting to conquer an inferior race. Instead, they had awoken a sleeping giant. The first true human offensive came in the dead of night. Under the cover of darkness, a series of coordinated strikes targeted key predator supply bases across the globe. These were not mere raids. They were surgical strikes, planned with meticulous precision. Human commandos infiltrated predator-controlled zones using technology reverse-engineered from captured enemy equipment. They moved like ghosts, eliminating guards, sabotaging weapons, planting explosives in critical infrastructure. When the first explosions rocked the enemy strongholds, chaos erupted among the invaders. Predator forces scrambled to respond, but the humans had already vanished into the night. The losses were staggering. Entire supply chains were crippled. Fuel depots exploded in towering infernos, ammunition stockpiles were reduced to nothing but burning wreckage, and command posts were systematically destroyed. The attacks had been so flawlessly executed that by the time predator forces regrouped, there was nothing left to defend. This was not mere survival. This was retribution. For millennia, the predators had used psychological warfare to dominate their enemies. Fear was their primary weapon, and submission was always the inevitable result. But now, the tables had turned. Humans began to use deception and terror in ways the predators had never imagined. Misinformation campaigns spread through intercepted predator channels, feeding them false intelligence. Ambushes were staged in such a way that survivors would return to their command with tales of horrors they had barely escaped, spreading fear among their own ranks. The once proud invaders, who had relied on fear to control others, now found themselves its victims. The predator soldiers, once unwavering in their confidence, now hesitated before entering the ruins of cities, afraid of the traps that awaited them. Every shadow became a threat. Every abandoned building, a potential death trap. Panic began to spread through their ranks, shattering the unity that had once made them unstoppable. They had come expecting to exterminate a primitive species. Instead, they were being hunted. With each passing day, the cracks in the predator war machine grew wider. Supply shortages became rampant. Communications were constantly disrupted. The once well-organized chain of command began to fracture under the relentless human assault. Humanity's ability to adapt was proving to be their deadliest weapon. The first predator landings had encountered conventional military forces, but by now, humans had adjusted their tactics. Using stolen predator technology, human scientists and engineers developed energy-based weaponry, counteracting the enemy's technological advantage. What was once an insurmountable gap was rapidly closing. More importantly, humans had studied their enemy. Predator physiology, tactics, and weaknesses had been analyzed in detail. Their reliance on centralized command structures made them vulnerable to decapitation strikes. Their overconfidence made them blind to unorthodox tactics. And most importantly, their inability to handle prolonged conflict was their ultimate weakness. Unlike the predators, humans had waged wars that lasted for years, even decades. Attrition was a game humanity knew well. And they played it to perfection. Then came the moment that changed everything, the first major space battle in Earth's orbit. For weeks, human engineers had been working in secret, retrofitting old satellites and salvaging destroyed predator warships. Using capture technology, they had built makeshift space-based weapon platforms. It wasn't much compared to the Predator fleet, but it was enough. When the next wave of Predator reinforcements arrived in orbit, they were met with a coordinated barrage from both the surface and the newly armed satellites. Precision missile strikes, electromagnetic pulses, and railgun fire cut through the Predator fleet with brutal efficiency. The invaders, expecting an easy planetary bombardment, found themselves instead in the middle of a carefully orchestrated kill zone. For the first time since the invasion began, a Predator fleet was forced to retreat from Earth's orbit. Humanity had not only survived, they had struck back in a way that no species had ever done before. The psychological impact of this loss was immeasurable. The predators, who had always fought with the confidence of the invincible, were now doubting their supremacy. The once unstoppable force had been stopped. As news of the defeat spread, Predator commanders were forced to reassess the entire war. Their strategy had failed. Their forces were demoralized. And worst of all, humanity was no longer on the defensive. The Predators were losing control of the battlefield. Their supply lines were collapsing. Their forces were fracturing. And now, their fleets were being driven back. The tide had turned. The humans, once viewed as nothing more than an insignificant species, had become a nightmare for the Predators. And they were just getting started. The Predator High Command was in turmoil. The tide of war had turned so drastically that their once unshakable confidence had been reduced to desperation. Reports from the battlefield painted a grim picture. Their forces were dwindling, their fleets were struggling to hold orbit, and their soldiers, once feared conquerors, were now prey to a species that refused to be subjugated. The invasion of Earth was no longer a war of dominance, it had become a war of survival. Desperation breeds innovation, and the Predators, despite their arrogance, were not entirely incapable of adapting. For the first time in their history, they abandoned the strategy of overwhelming force and sought new methods to counter humanity's relentless resistance. If brute strength could not break them, perhaps subterfuge and deception could. Realizing that conventional tactics were failing, the Predator High Command turned to psychological warfare. The goal was simple: divide humanity, spread discord, and weaken their collective resolve. They initiated a series of misinformation campaigns, using hacked communication networks to plant false reports of betrayals, secret human-predator alliances, and fabricated military failures. They hoped that paranoia and fear would do what their weapons could not: fracture human unity. However, humanity had experienced such tactics before. Throughout their history, disinformation had been used as a tool of war, and they had long since developed countermeasures. Cyber warfare units worked tirelessly to isolate and dismantle the Predator propaganda networks, while human leaders broadcast messages of resilience, unity, and defiance. The Predator plan to sow chaos had failed before it could even take root. Seeing their initial gambit fail, the Predators resorted to something far more sinister: biological warfare. Using their advanced genetic engineering, they unleashed a series of engineered plagues upon human cities, designed to weaken resistance and decimate populations without destroying valuable infrastructure. But once again, humanity adapted. Scientists, doctors, and researchers worked around the clock to develop vaccines, containment protocols, and countermeasures. What the Predators had expected to be a death knell for humanity instead became a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. Frustrated, the Predators escalated their tactics. They began targeting Earth's resources, launching surgical strikes against food supplies, water purification plants, and power grids. Their goal was to starve humanity into submission. But humans, having endured countless sieges and blockades in their own history, anticipated such a move. Underground bunkers and stockpiles ensured that major populations could withstand prolonged hardships. Farmers and engineers devised ways to grow food in protected environments, and new energy solutions emerged to counteract the power shortages. Once again, the Predators were met with defiance. While the Predators struggled to adapt, humanity had been preparing a new phase of their own war strategy. Having turned the tide on the ground and in orbit, they set their sights beyond mere survival. It was time to take the fight to the invaders. For months, captured Predator technology had been reverse-engineered. Human scientists had developed new hybrid weaponry, integrating alien energy systems into their own arsenal. Exosuits, plasma-based firearms, and advanced battlefield AI were deployed to the front lines. Humanity had not only caught up to the Predators technologically, but they were beginning to surpass them. The counteroffensive began with a series of bold strikes against Predator command centers. Using their growing fleet of captured and repurposed Predator vessels, human forces launched hit-and-run assaults on enemy outposts across the solar system. Predator ships, once symbols of terror, were now used against their creators. Every successful raid weakened the enemy further, breaking their supply lines and disrupting their chain of command. The true turning point came when human forces launched a daring operation to seize a Predator dreadnought, the pride of their fleet. This vessel, a behemoth of destruction, had long been thought untouchable. But human ingenuity proved otherwise. Utilizing a combination of cyber warfare, infiltration tactics, and direct assault, human special forces breached the ship's defenses and took control of the war machine. The sight of a Predator dreadnought now flying Earth's banner sent shockwaves through the invader ranks. The loss of the dreadnought was more than just a tactical defeat, it was a psychological catastrophe for the Predators. Their warriors, already shaken by humanity's unyielding resistance, now saw their greatest weapon turned against them. Doubt spread like wildfire through the Predator ranks. Some began to question their leadership, while others simply deserted, unwilling to continue a war they now believed was unwinnable. Sensing weakness, humanity pressed the advantage. Coordinated assaults struck deep into Predator-controlled territory, dismantling their remaining footholds on Earth one by one. The invaders, who had once believed themselves unstoppable, were now being forced into full retreat. Their once mighty empire, built on the bones of countless conquered civilizations, was crumbling before their eyes. Even as Predator forces abandoned Earth, humanity was not content to let them flee unpunished. The war had changed them. No longer were they simply defending their homeworld, now, they were avengers of the countless worlds the Predators had destroyed before them. The decision was made, humanity would chase them beyond the stars. With Earth secured, humanity turned its eyes toward the void. The war had forced them to evolve in ways they had never imagined. They were no longer just a species confined to a single world, they had become something greater, a force to be reckoned with among the stars. The first human-led war fleets, composed of both retrofitted Predator vessels and newly designed warships, prepared for departure. The goal was clear, to ensure that the Predators would never again threaten another world. They would take the fight to the heart of the enemy's empire. What had started as an invasion had become something far more. It was no longer a battle for survival. It was a battle for dominance. The Predators had underestimated humanity. And now, they would pay the price. The Predator forces were in full retreat. What had once been an unstoppable invasion had turned into a desperate flight for survival. The mighty war machine that had subjugated countless worlds had met its match, not in superior technology, but in the unbreakable spirit of humanity. The war was no longer about conquest, it was about survival, and for the first time in their history, the Predators found themselves as the ones being hunted. Humanity did not relent. The invaders had come with fire and fury, expecting easy victory, but they had found only resistance, resilience, and the bitter taste of defeat. The decision was made, Earth would not simply be defended, the fight would be taken to the Predator's own doorstep. The war was no longer about survival alone, it was about ensuring that such a threat could never rise again. Human fleets, forged from a combination of their own technological ingenuity and repurposed Predator vessels, began their campaign beyond the solar system. Humanity, once confined to its own world, was now an interstellar force, expanding its reach with the singular goal of eradicating the Predator threat. Each battle was a lesson, each victory a step closer to dominance. The Predators, who had once reveled in their unchallenged rule, were now learning what it meant to be prey. Their empire, built on fear and ruthless conquest, was crumbling. Planet by planet, outpost by outpost, humanity struck back. Where once Predator fleets had descended upon civilizations with overwhelming power, now human warships arrived with terrifying efficiency. They dismantled enemy infrastructure, crippled supply chains, and sowed chaos within Predator command structures. The war escalated beyond anything the Predators had ever known. Accustomed to quick, decisive victories, they were ill-prepared for a prolonged conflict against an enemy that adapted faster than they could counter. Their hierarchical leadership structure, once a source of strength, became their undoing. Humanity had learned to exploit their rigid chain of command, targeting key figures and unraveling their organizational stability. Assassinations, precision strikes, and deep cover infiltrations became common tactics. Every move the Predators made was anticipated, countered, and used against them. Desperation pushed the Predators to their last, terrible gambit. If they could not win, they would ensure humanity's destruction by any means necessary. Plans were drawn for a scorched earth campaign, where they would deploy their most devastating weapons to wipe out entire worlds rather than let them fall into human hands. But humanity was relentless. These final, desperate measures were intercepted and neutralized before they could be enacted. Every step the predators took towards annihilation was met with human ingenuity and sheer determination. The final battle came on the predator homeworld, a fortress planet thought to be unassailable. Here, the last remnants of the predator high command prepared for their final stand. But humanity was ready. With precision and tactical brilliance, they struck the heart of the Empire. Orbital bombardments, ground invasions, and cyber warfare combined in a symphony of destruction. The predators, once conquerors of the galaxy, were now fighting for their very existence. As the final predator stronghold fell, the surviving members of their species realized a horrifying truth: their reign was over. The last of their leaders, once so assured of their supremacy, now stood in chains before their conquerors. There would be no negotiations, no peace treaties. The war had begun with an invasion, and it ended with the complete dismantling of the predator empire. But humanity was not the same species that had once looked to the stars with wonder. They had been forged in the fires of war, and now, they had become something far greater than they had ever imagined. With their enemy vanquished, the question remained, what would they do with this new power? They had fought for survival. They had fought for revenge. But now, they had fought for dominance. And as the last predator world fell silent, the galaxy took notice. A new force had risen, one that did not conquer for conquest's sake, but one that would never allow itself to be threatened again. The predators had learned fear. And now, the galaxy would learn to fear humanity.